I'd like to, I'm Katie Davidson, and I'm a junior at Grant High School.
My name is Alima Bradley. I'm a junior at Jefferson High School.
My name is Grant McCall. I'm a junior at Cleveland.
I'm Caitlin Gaines, and I'm a senior at Cleveland.
I'm Jose Moreno. I go to Roosevelt, North Portland.
My name's Kimberly Gasu, and I'm a freshman at Franklin.
My name is Monica, and I'm a sophomore at MLC.
Yeah, my name is John, and I'm a senior at Lincoln.
So what SuperSac does is we're a district-level leadership program, and we're mostly all high school students, and we're trying to open that up to middle school students later on this year. So what we're going to do is we're going to start the forum now. So we're going to count off by threes, and we're going to go around, and then you guys are going to be in groups, and we're going to go through the agenda, which is posted up here. And so we'll have the presentation and then some group sessions. All right, so SuperSac go around sitting with you guys to formulate the questions and everything. So have them go down, and we're going to start the presentation.
Thanks, Katie. Welcome, everyone. My name is Kim Fox Middleton. Hopefully it's not too loud. All right, so I'm in the Community Involvement and Public Affairs Department, and I do a lot of outreach, so I'm really excited about today's meeting for youth. So welcome, parents. It's great to see you, and it's great to see the students here. Okay, so Katie mentioned the DBRAC, and the DBRAC is, as you can see, the District-Wide Boundary Review Committee. It was created in 2014. They've actually been meeting for over a year, and it is, it's been a learning curve, learning about the enrollment, learning about the district, and the challenges that we face coming up with our boundary and our enrollment. So their job is to develop a set of values and guide proposals for balancing enrollment across the district. And then they actually will then advise the superintendent based on the feedback that we've been receiving from our community meetings. We've had actually, including today, we've had 15 community meetings, 2 of which have been with students. This one, and then we met with the Pano Ally. And then we've also had meetings with teachers, and then the administrators as well as the community. So who is DBRAC? It's people like you and me. They're parents, they're community members, and they're also teachers and students as well. So they represent a wide range of people in the Portland area. So what we're going to do today, Katie has an agenda, but we also have a video, and then Katie will go a little bit more through your agenda, have the presentation, as she mentioned, discuss, and she broke it up in small groups, and there will be a question and answer. And then after the meeting, both Jason and I will be available to answer questions. So in regards to moving forward, what you won't see in the scenarios that, if you didn't get it there over on the table, is that it's not a definitive plan for change. These are only draft. It's a conversation starter for people to basically discuss what works, what doesn't. And as we get the information, like I said, we've had several meetings, those will be incorporated for DBRAC to work on and prepare for a scenario that would go to the superintendent. The other thing about the scenario is when you look at it, if schools are having to change based on the size of things like that, it's not a list of good or bad schools. And we have excellent educators, professionals working in our schools. They're working tirelessly in our schools. And it's about how do we accommodate the change that's coming up in basically 10 years with the enrollment going up by 5,000 students. And the main thing that I want to emphasize, because people have asked me this, is, oh, come on, Kim, there's a preferred scenario. I'm like, no, there isn't. There really isn't. The staff is saying, we want to hear recommendations, concerns that the community has, so they can then go back, look at things, massage it a little bit, and then come up with a scenario based on with DBRAC as well. So you're not picking, door A or door B. You're looking at the scenarios, having a discussion, and looking at what are some of the concerns, what works, what doesn't, and then passing that on to DBRAC, who then will pass it on to the staff and the superintendent. So,
and good evening, everybody. My name is Jason Trombley, and I am the chairman of the District-Wide Boundary Review Advisory Committee, or DBRAC. I'm also an alumnus of Portland Public Schools. I went to Clarendon Elementary and Portsmouth Middle School, which is now Cesar Chavez K-8 School in North Portland, but I also am a graduate of Lincoln High School. So part of the question that we have to figure out tonight is, so why are we here and why is the district doing this process? So the district is now in, I believe, its 7th year of enrollment growth after a decade's worth of enrollment decline. So right now we're at around between 47 and 48,000 students. Over the next 5 to 10 years, the district is poised to grow by an additional about 5,000 to 6,000 students across the district. So one of the things that the district has to figure out is, as students are growing throughout the region, how are we going to find a way to, ensure that they're going to be in strong schools throughout the city and have access to strong programs. So that's part of the reason DBRAC is doing this process. So the first step that we're looking at in terms of how do we manage this, question of growth and getting you all access to more programs is how do we actually do that? What are the building blocks for us to actually do that for everybody? And so the first step is how do we actually get the money into schools to have the programs that you all are interested in? And so the first step that you actually do that is by looking at the enrollment for every particular school. What happens is your parents pay a whole series of taxes, property tax dollars, et cetera, that goes to the state. And the state, through a comprehensive formula, a number of those dollars get sent back to the school district. And that money actually goes to the school based on the number of students that are actually in your building. So the first step is to actually build your programs is we get you the resources. So the first step to the equation is the number of students in your building or enrollment generates the number of dollars or money that you have in your school. So the second step is once the building has the particular number of resources, what do those resources actually do? And the main way that we offer our programs is through the hiring of your teachers. So what the resources do is buys the different teachers to do so that you all have the access to programs like your drama teacher, your math teacher, your art teacher, your social studies and language arts teachers. All of those teachers are hired through the money that your parents pay from property taxes that go to the state and back to your school. So then from there, once we hire the teachers are hired based on a base level platform or what's called the core program. So the district believes that there should be a base level of programs that every kid should be able to have in every school, regardless of what part of Portland you live in. So the formula and the money is designed in such a way to ensure that every kid, every student has the ability to offer any kind of program throughout the district. So to kind of recap is from when your parents pay the different kinds of taxes that go to the state, comes back to Portland Public Schools, goes back to the schools themselves, and with the number of students that you have or the number of classmates you have in your building, that's the enrollment or the class sizes that you've got, which generates the money that you have, which therefore hires the teachers that you've got in your schools, which help determine the kinds of programs your school gets to have. So one of the next thing that we as a committee and a number of the staff members had to figure out is, okay, if we think every student we want to make sure that they have access to, really awesome social studies programs like, mock trial and social studies and learning activities and electives like music and theater and art and journalism. The question is, how do we do that in the 90 plus buildings that we've got? So we have over 90 school buildings that can house anywhere from kindergarten through 5th grade. Some house kindergarten through 8th grade. Some are middle schools which house only 6th through 8th grades. And then we also have our high schools. So the question we have to ask, we were asking ourselves over the course of the year is, based on the number of enrollment of students that we have and the size of the buildings that we've got, what gets us the opportunity so that you all as students get to access all of the really exciting programs that you're interested in? So that's the first question we have to ask ourselves over the past year is, what is the right sequence that gets us to where we think that you all have access to more programs than what you have now, or what you hopefully will have over the next several years? So this is kind of so staff went back and did a huge series of math and analysis to tell us, and this is what they came up with. So are there students here that are at K-8 schools? I think there are some students that were from Beverly Cleary. Awesome. So schools like K-8s, like Beverly Clear, for example, here's what the district thinks in order for you to have access to different kinds of programs and electives. You should have 3 sections or 3 classes per grade. So it's if you and your classmates have 1 of 3 first grade teachers, 1 of 3 second grade teachers, etc. What they also saw was schools that are K-8s can potentially have 2 classes per grade, but there's a little bit of a problem there in that if you go down to 2 classes per grade, it's tough because we can offer you the same level of programming, but if kids move from one school to the next year, it impacts what your classmates may have next year. So if we think buildings can have 3 classes per grade, you'll be able to have whatever you want or more programs year after year, and that program you have this year, you'll have next year and your siblings as well. So they asked themselves, the district asked themselves that question as well for schools that are K-5. And so what they found was schools that are identified as K-5 schools, that if you have that 3 or 4 classes per grade, kids in elementary grades will be able to offer similar programs at the elementary grades. So are there any students here that are from schools that are K-5? What school are you from? Okay. So that's what we were able to find at the K-5 level. What we also then asked them was, for schools that are middle school, so it's at 6 through 8, the question was, where is that opportunity for middle school successful? And so what the district found for us was, if middle schools had a minimum of 450 students, that means we think you can be able to offer strong access, really access to exciting programs and electives. So that's what we think. The other thing that they assumed in this was every middle school have at least between 2 and 4 elementary schools, or 2 to 4 K-5 schools going into your middle school. So if that happens in your middle school, then we think it'll be successful. So for students that are in pre-K to 5, here's what the district thinks you all should be having right now. This is the ideal, at least as a base. So everything from reading, writing, and math to social studies, health and wellness, library, and then also 3 kinds of enrichments or electives every part of the week. Also, we think you should be exposed to, you should be able to get some kind of a foreign language in elementary school. So I think a number of elementary schools have, language immersion programs. So that's one of the things we think a number of elementary schools should have. Now, also for students who are in 6-8 or the middle grades, this is what we think, this is what the district believes every kid at the middle grade should have. So again, it's similar to elementary in that it's language arts, reading and writing. This time you get access to science programs, social studies, math, a few more enrichments, or elective classes in the middle grades, gym class 2 times a week, more foreign language, access to library and with more technology, and some additional support. So in the middle school levels, we think in the district believe that ideally every kid at a middle school level should get that. So with all of that, so with all of the numbers, and then also with the ideal programs we think every kid should have, or what we hope every kid gets access to, we need to find a way so that it actually does a couple of things. We need to be able to have all of those programs with all of your teachers in that building. Because so I'm curious for any students here, do any of you think that your classroom feels kind of crowded at times? Anybody? It's okay to be honest. Okay, that's a lot of you, okay. So one of the things we have to ask ourselves is, can you get access to all of those programs and all of those things you want to do and learn about without feeling too crowded? So that's the one thing we know. Kids love to learn, but they don't like being so tight together. So that question is, we have to figure out, what do we do about that? But there's a bunch of other things we know that, some students need additional, help during the school day or after school. So everything from, support classes to, counselors, a computer lab, a science lab. So all of these other things that help you learn really well, we have to find a way to fit all of that into the building. So in the end, what we think the right size school fits everything that I just talked about. Number of students to have the program so that you get to have access to a lot more than what we hope you'll have. Enough teachers so that you have the programs, the program itself, and the actual classroom space to do it. So that's all of the things we're trying to figure out in this process is, how do we get you all what we just showed you on the screen tonight? So that's the ideal, that's what we're hoping for. And so part 2 of the presentation that I'll kind of share with you all is what are our schools doing now? Or what schools are meeting the mark and doing that, and where do we have some difficulty? So the first thing that the district helped us recognize was there are a number of schools, and a number of you raised your hand and said you felt like your school was crowded. There's a lot of kids in your school. Yeah. So what we learned, and the district helped us understand, was that there were 11 schools at the K-8 level, so elementary or middle or a K-8, that were overcrowded or have that like really crowding effect. And one of the things that we realized too is, given that population is going to grow by 5,000 students in the next 10 years by 2025, that if we don't do something to fix the schools that have that crowded effect now, we feel like it's going to get worse. So we feel like we have to try and fix that. And then also one of the things we know is as more students come into school and sign up for school on the first day and go to class, that gives us an opportunity to say if it's more kids, we have the ability to hire more teachers where every student gets a chance to take more programs and electives. So that's the opportunity. We get to give you all more programs, but the tough part is some schools are going to be feeling even more crowded. So that's one of the problems we've got now we know we want to fix. And then the last thing is, there are some schools right now that are so overcrowded that they can't fit in their actual building. So we actually have to do things like get a trailer or a portable. So sometimes you'll go to class that's actually in your school and actually have to cross the blacktop patio to get to your outdoor classroom. So there are some schools actually in the system where kids, even at the elementary and middle school levels, have to do that. So that's one of the things we know happens a lot, but we don't want to do that too often and for a long period of time. We want kids to be able to go into the school, into the programs without having to go to class in a trailer. That's one of the things we know we have to fix. And this kind of sums up what I was just talking about. So some of the classrooms that, because there are schools that are overcrowded, there are a lot of things that go on as a result. So there are some rooms where in buildings where there are classrooms that shouldn't be classrooms, or rooms that are office space for your teachers that shouldn't be. So I heard an example where there was a bathroom that was converted 3 years ago and it's now a classroom space. There are some places where there's some places in buildings where a counselor in her new office, it used to be a closet. So there are these rooms that should not be places where you all get to have fun and learn and get support, but it's happening a lot. So it's one of the things we know we want to be able to try and fix. Problem number 2 is what we're defining as under-enrolled. So a while back when I was talking about how you need to have a minimum number of students in your building, number of classmates in your building to have really cool, exciting programs. So what the district was able to help us identify was there are at least 9 schools that have low enrollment such that kids don't get to have access to the programs that you saw on a few pages back. So the art, the music, social studies. Some kids, because their school doesn't have enough students in the building, they don't have the ability to offer it. Kids or sometimes their neighbors don't get a chance to get access to what you might have at your school. And we know that's wrong, and that's one of the things we know we want to try and fix through this process, through this work. So we have 9 schools that don't have the really good enrollment that we hope they'll have. We also know that the number of schools that are identified as K-8 schools, 20 of the 29 schools that are identified as K-8s don't have enough enrollment at the middle grades level, at the 6A levels. So the programs that you saw, like getting access to science labs and science classes, schools that are K-8, some of them can't offer that to students in the middle grades because they don't have enough kids. And that's part of the reality that happens in 2/3 of our K through 8 schools. So that's another thing that we've learned over time is as we've changed some of our schools to offer have kids be in grades K through 8 in a building. That's one of the things that happen. And so it's one of the things that we're trying, hopefully we'll begin to fix. And so within that, with these things that are happening, even through all these changes, your number of your parents over time really stepped up in a lot of big ways when the district couldn't help. So your parents that go to the big auction at your school every year, or that help you do like the candy sales or the car washes and things like that. All of those activities have managed to really help some schools offer the programs that you want. So in times when money was short and we didn't have enough kids, your parents really stepped up in a big way to really help give you kids what you really want. And some schools they weren't as successful. So that's part of the reality that we were struggling with. And so one of the things that we want to try and do is, how do we find a way to offer all of the programs you want without your parents having to fundraise all the time? So that's one of the things we know we've got to fix too. And we're hopefully starting that path to doing that. Okay. This is a big graph with a lot of color-coded bars, so I will do my best to explain it as easily as I can. Okay, so do you all remember a couple of slides back when I talked about the schools that are K through 8, and you have an idea where if you have 3 classes per grade, you're a healthy school, something like that. But if you're 2 classes per grade, then it's tougher to have programs. So what the district was able to do for us was this is a list of, I think, all of the K-8 buildings right now that have that less than ideal enrollment. And so this is what they did for us. So they said, if you are at the 3 classes per grade, so you have 3 classes, you're a healthy building. So they identified which buildings actually have the three classes per grade. It's these 2 right here. Then they were able to identify, okay, which K-8s actually have 2 classes per grade, which means you can operate okay and be pretty successful. That's these schools right here, these schools that are in yellow. And then what they were able to find also was schools that didn't have enough students in the building to be successful. That's all of these. So based on student numbers alone. Now the one thing I do want to say is this does not account for things like your parents raising a lot of money to help the school out. That's what this does not show. So from number of kids in the building alone, if parents weren't able to step up and help fundraise to help your school out, these buildings wouldn't be able to offer strong enough programs. So the only thing we own and want to try and fix is, how do we have these schools who don't have enough kids, whose parents are really stepping up, how can we make sure that they have enough resources to be successful or have the money to offer programs as these schools, so that all of these schools on this slide can be successful. So your friends and neighbors that you meet throughout the city, any part of town, they'll be in schools that they're coming, having fun, and ready to go. So it's one of the things we know we have to fix, and we're going to try and fix. So the last thing in this part is, why do those numbers matter? The short answer is, if we have those high numbers every year, and I mean every single year, those result in us being able to say, if you want a music program this year, you're more likely guaranteed to have it next year and the year after that. So if you do like your first year of theater, it's the same thing. First year of social studies, and you have a teacher that you really love that is really supportive of you, makes you feel special, and you have a fun place to learn, that those teachers and programs are going to be there next year and the year after. So that way when you finish elementary school and go to middle school, but there's a good shot that your younger brothers and sisters will be able to have that really cool teacher too. So the more kids that we have in a building, and the more often those kids show up in those buildings year after year, the more of those opportunities will happen. So it's one of the things we know has got to get fixed, and we think we can. It's not easy, but we think we can. And the last thing, and our problem that we have to deal with, is for the schools that are kindergarten through 8th grade, there are some schools that we know are really small, because a lot of our buildings were built over long periods of time. There are some that are really small, but don't even have enough space in the building to house the number of students that we would like to have. So you have this weird thing happen where you're both too small and you're too big. And there are a couple of buildings in the system that just do that. So So again, so back to the K-8 discussion. So one of the things that we know is that balance of they don't have the space and they don't have enough students. So one of the things we know we have to fix is how do we deal with that problem too? So basically we're trying to fix a whole bunch of problems together. And we acknowledge there's no easy answer and no easy way to do it. But that's why this committee of volunteers that I chair, we're stepping in to say, we're going to find a way to fix it. So one effort to actually solve this problem, what we think is, how do we find a way to actually get the stable and consistent numbers across? So how do we make sure that every middle school has 3 sections per grade and the same for elementary schools, for example, so the programs you will want will be there for 5 to 10 years and even more so. So that's one of the things we need to try and figure out for this. The other thing that we know too is that there are a number of buildings right now that are that kindergarten through 8th grade building right now that we're kind of wondering, is that the right fit for that building? If it were, for example, a K-5 or a middle school, could that building actually house better, more programs and programs that can be housed for a longer period of time? So that's one of the things that we know we're going into is some schools right now that are K-8s that actually are in buildings that used to be a middle school. Maybe we should turn that building back into a middle school because if that works, the programs we hope you'll have will be able to be there when you get to that next school. So it's one of the questions we also have to fix or address. So what your table, what you all will be looking at in a few minutes at some point is you're going to look at the 2 maps that we're actually looking at, that were generated by the school district. And so what the school district did was they asked us to say, okay, here are the problems, and what do we think, what's the checklist we want you to go through to fix all of the problems we've identified, or you've told us that are problems. And so what they did was they took all of those factors that we gave them and said, okay, based on everything you've told us and all of the listening and research and homework that you guys have done, these are the 2 maps that we think fix a lot of these problems over time. They're not perfect. They're not like the ideal thing. They're starters. So what you all will be able to do in a few minutes is to actually look at the maps with your fellow students and say, based on the information that I'm looking at and based on what we're hoping the district can do, is which map actually fixes some of those problems, and where do those maps need some more changes. So I think there are markers on the tables, or the markers will be handed out. So you'll actually be able to look at all the maps and figure out what new changes you can add to make them better. So you're basically getting a chance to really help your fellow classmates and the younger classmates and your siblings that are coming to the schools soon in the future. So this is what tonight's going to be about. So here's what the maps do. So the schools that are currently K-8s in the first map that you'll look at, 22 of 29 of them are going to get converted to either an elementary or a middle school. In scenario 2, 16 of them will. In the first scenario, there's another thing that we're doing, what's called a boundary change. And so what that does, it's a line on a map that says if you live in this certain part of the city, you go to a particular elementary, middle, and high school. And so what happens is, if a line moves in a particular neighborhood, those students may in fact go to a different elementary, middle, or high school, depending on where that line goes. So what happens in the first map that you'll look at is, at the K-8 level, there are boundary changes at 35 K through 8 level schools. So 35 K-8s, 35 K-8 schools, so it's a combination of elementary, middle, and K-8 schools, have that kind of a boundary change. In the second map, it's 36. And then also what happens in the first map is there are 2 buildings that have been closed for a long period of time, but we're actually going to reopen. And in the second scenario, that's the same. So what do these scenarios do? So what we think is some buildings that don't have enough students, we think that there's 9 of them currently on the map that do that. And in both maps, that there's only going to be 1 left. So a number of schools that we think are, have a lot of kids and it feels really tight, there's currently 11. We get a chance to reduce that to only 1 school in the system. In addition, so you'll see your table mates will actually help you walk through some of these additional details. Like there are some schools where some students in the city may go to a different high school than where they know they're going to go to currently. So that you'll see, we'll talk through some of those changes tonight. And then the one thing I wanted to say is, DBRAC has been involved in this big stage of work for the past year, doing its homework, figuring out what the system is, where things are, where we think the school district is going in the next 10 years. And so this is where we are, and this is where you're going to help us move forward tonight, which is you're going to tell me as the DBRAC chair and the students that are here tonight, how do we help the school system better serve you? How do we help you get more of what you're excited to learn about tonight? So you're going to help us make some big steps forward tonight, and that's what I hope you'll be able to do with us. And then the last thing is in terms of what the next steps are. After you all give us our feedback tonight, we'll take all of that feedback, put together a report that says here are the changes that we think can be made and to do it successfully. The superintendent, who's the big manager for the school district, will then present it in January to the school board, who will say, okay, this is a good plan, or go back and kind of do it over, or this is a good plan and offer some additional changes. So, and then also the young woman in the back, Katie Davidson, who's the student rep to the school board, she'll be one of the folks that will be actually taking your feedback and also evaluating the plan in January. So to some extent, my report officially goes to her. So this is the process, so this is where we are. And I think generally what's going to happen is we're going to break up into groups shortly, and Katie's coming up and kind of walk you through what we're going to do tonight. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to hear from your voices tonight, and I look forward to listening on how you think we can better serve you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over back to Katie.
Thank you, Jason. So we started about 20 minutes late, and I wanted to check in to see if maybe we could go until 7:45. Does that sound good to anybody? Raise of hands who would want to stay. If not, we can do it really quick. So I'm going to revise the agenda, tonight's agenda, and we're going to do maybe 1 to 2 small group discussions. Mostly we're going to pull out the maps, we're going to go over them with your groups. We've got a couple questions that we're going to ask you while you're looking at the maps. And then we're going to report back, and then we're going to have thoughts for DBRAC to go forward. Does that sound okay? Proposed agenda sound okay? All right, we're going to do that. So if you don't have maps or enough maps at your table, why don't you go and get some? We can have the SuperSac members. And then the markers on the table are for you to mark up the maps. I can get you, we have a couple more markers as well. So just let us know. And introduce yourselves to the other people at your table. Make sure they're, be friendly. And we'll be back. The first session will be about maybe 15 to 20 minutes, and I'll check in halfway through. So I'm going to pass around the microphone, and we are going to just share out one person from your table, the note taker maybe from SuperSac, might share what they heard from their group, and if someone that really wants to speak, they are welcome to speak, and then we're going to do suggestions for DBRAC going forward. So that's kind of what it is. So I'm going to hand it off to group 1 first.
Okay. Well, what we've heard at this table is that like Lincoln and like CSS have like problems at their school. It's like they're like overcrowded or something. Yeah, and also Beverly Cleary, yeah. Some of their like bathrooms are like broken down and like like poisoned and like broke. Yeah.
Anything about the maps? Did you look at the maps at all? Don't worry, you won't be turning in the max if you don't want to.
So Lincoln specifically is super overcrowded. So we're just talking about that, how like the bathrooms don't work and like it's super unsafe and there's asbestos like dripping from the ceiling. And then Crater Science School, they're also very overcrowded and they're not allowed to go on the playground and kids keep getting injured. So yeah.
Well, people are saying that schools are undercrowded when really their buildings can't have that many students in the building or else people will be getting trampled. I've actually been pushed through the hallway before, so I think we need I think that we should convert some of the K-8 schools into K-5 and middle schools and move kids around because it would be much better for space and keeping things.
We're going to switch it up and we're going to go to group 3.
Well, we said that the location of the school are schools that kids would be moving to would be inconvenient for kids and for adults, and kids would have to walk over a highway to get to school, and we don't think that's very safe. And we also think that in scenario 1, it's kind of just redistributing the kids, but it's not really solving the overcrowding issue. And yeah, that's it.
I'm John from Lincoln, and we had some students representing Lincoln High School 3, I think, 2 representing Beverly Cleary, and 1 over here representing Irvington. And I was really happy to hear some of the things that were said. It's kind of a general consensus here that we feel classes are overcrowded, and that while actually at Irvington there are some classrooms that aren't really being used, so there's kind of an uneven spread of students. And oddly enough, that actually occurs at some schools, and at Irvington there's actually a special situation happening wherein there's class splits. So there's some special consideration that needs to be made for schools like that. But on the whole, for places like Lincoln or Beverly Cleary, we feel like there needs to be more classrooms and smaller class sizes. Do you guys want to talk? Oh, actually, why don't you talk?
The class sizes? Yeah. So, we have way too many kids in our classes, and I think that it would be a lot easier to learn, and class would be way more productive if we had maybe 20 students in each class instead of the usual 26 to 28 students.
What school are you at?
And I'm at Beverly Cleary.
Could you talk a little bit about Irvington? Oh, say where you're from.
My name is Leilani. I'm from Irvington K-8 school. And I just think that the classes, there's too many splits, and that we should use more of the classes downstairs and where like the cafeteria is. And another thing is that there's like people like me, they're kind of like, they learn math faster, and then we're bored during math class and we don't do anything, and that we should have more challenging classes like a special class for people who need to be challenged.
All right, so now I think we're gonna open it up to students who want to talk about steps going forward for DBRAC. Is there anyone that would like to speak for that? Yeah, awesome. Well, there's actually 6 of us. You guys want to go out front?
Could you grab that other mic?
Okay, hi, I'm Charlotte.
I'm Maeve.
I'm Brooke.
I'm Lily. I'm Mackenzie.
I'm Maya. We're 7th graders from Beverly Cleary, and we'd like to stick with the K through 8 model for Beverly Cleary for these reasons.
Because middle schoolers seem better behaved with younger kids around who are kind of watching them for an example. And there's a stronger community and better friendships with the K-8 model because you'll know the same people for like 9 years if you go there the whole time. So you can like build better friendships, and it's just probably more comfortable to go there.
Students starting middle school will have better self-esteem because they don't feel like they're the youngest. They won't be the youngest in the school, and for some people that's kind of uncomfortable. And being in a K through 8, it's just a more enjoyable environment, or we think that it's a more enjoyable environment overall.
And we also think that with option 1, we would be like disrupting multiple schools in significant ways. And then about half of our teachers would have to be moved, or they wouldn't have anywhere to go, or just they wouldn't be able to teach at Beverly Cleary anymore.
Also, we think that it's fixing a problem that isn't really broken, because although there is overcrowding in some schools, including Beverly Cleary, we think that since we have such a great community that it's not as necessary to move us around, but we think that it's lots of unnecessary time and money spent on option 1 because we feel that it's more important that we focus that time and money on other schools who don't have as many resources as we do, and to try to make them have like more, just more students, like so what he was talking about, so then they can have better electives and things. So we figure that it's kind of, we'd rather have option 2.
So we also kind of thought that it's not really going to solve the overcrowding because there's still going to be multiple schools that have too many kids, and also that like families that have like younger children and older children, like it'd be kind of hard to like get their kids to school at like a different campus, like 2 different campuses, and it would kind of mess up the morning schedule and stuff.
And then with option 1, you would be moving around like 73% of the students, where with option 2, you would only be moving around 10% of the students, which would be keeping the community together more.
Thank you for listening to our opinions, and please take them into consideration.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you, guys. So I've got some note cards. I've got some note cards and pieces of paper on the tables, and I would love for you to leave this forum with some thoughts that you have for DBRAC going forward. And then also on another note card, write down some things that you thought about this forum, how it went, how the time and location was, so that when we do more student forums, we know how to get it out there and what would work best for you guys. So thank you so much for coming, and once you have those, you can put them on the table over here, and you can have a wonderful evening. So thank you very much for coming.